So in the last episode, we talked about the importance of the stabilizer. But next, we're going to talk about how to really make the turn using a concept called supination. So supination is essentially when you get your racket to the end of the windup. If I just hold it neutral here, okay, and the racket strings are facing to the side court, if I just take my forearm and I rotate it, that's supination. And so the reason why you want supination is that's going to help you. Again, it's going to be a lot more aerodynamic, but it's going to help us really make the turn sharp so that you don't begin to flop the upswing. One of the biggest problems that players have today is as they get to the end of their windup, they're not in a supinated state, or their wrist is folded back into wrist extension, which pushes the elbow out of alignment to the shoulder. So once you have either that cradle we talked about in the other video, or that ulnar deviation mapping out to that sagittal plane, this is going to help you begin to gravitate towards supination. Now, if you have a lot of trouble with this piece, you can actually extend it beyond where you actually go full supination, where it looks like the hitting bed is actually facing behind you. And the reason why this is a good thing is as you start to make the turnaround, it will allow the racket to stay on its edge. And again, ultimately what you're trying to achieve here is you're trying to minimize any drag whatsoever. If the racket starts to open up, there will be essentially drag because the racket's not going to be on the edge. Just to give you an example of this, Roger Federer was amazing. But if you watch Roger as he makes his turnaround, you will see the racket face here. It will open up, and then as he gets into the upswing, you'll begin to see supination. So, could Roger actually have sped the serve up? He could have. All he needed was a little more supination going around the turn to maximize that speed. Okay? So now as we get to this reverse supination position, if you need it, the key is when you make this turnaround from the power drive, okay, here, and the stabilizer's up, when I push off, I want to make sure that this racket face does not begin to fold open. Here's why. If the racket begins to open up because the wrist is now facing up, it will cause your hinge here to begin to open. And when that begins to open, as you're trying to get into a deep stage 4, it opens up and now it reduces your runway. So now you're leaking out runway here. Okay, so you want to make sure that you maintain supination. Don't try to force it with your hand, but just hold it and then allow the momentum to then carry the racket around so that when you make the turn, you're making a sharp turn. So when you begin to enter the upswing, it's not self-correcting, it's already established, helping you create maximum aerodynamic speed. But another thing I want to point out here is that if you bring your racket up and the wrist starts to fold and you start to make this turnaround here going into stage 4, as we talked about, if this opens and this opens, effectively what's happening is the racket is making this wider turn. So if you think about NASCAR or even Formula 1 and you look at a car as it's going around the turn, you want to be the one making the closest turn so that you can shave off that extra speed to get around so you get to the finish line faster. The same thing. Contact is the finish line. If you start to map out and you have a wider turn, you've got drag, you're going to get there late. Okay, the key is for you to get there at speed with supination. You want to keep this position as close to that sagittal plane behind you all the way around so it stays closed. And a great example is what you can see now that Sabalenka is doing. If you watch Sabalenka, it doesn't look like she has any supination until the last second. She'll go up, her palm is facing to the side, and in the last moment, you'll see supination occur. If you look at her from the back, you'll notice there's no opening of the racket face. It's hyper-dynamic, and it stays right on edge all the way through the turn, creating maximum speed for her. All right, so remember, the ultimate goal here is to make sure you maximize supination around the turn if you have trouble with it. So let's do a recap. So once you get to the end of your wind-up setup and you're ready to push out, if your racket face is facing to the side and you push off, your palm will fold open, and that impacts the hinge. So when you get to the end peak here, rotate the forearm. Make sure, though, not to do this. Try not to over-pronounce the wrist into into wrist flexion here. So it looks like this. Avoid this. Stay a little bit. You can have a little bit of flexion, but don't hyperflex. So a little flexion, and then just add a little bit of rotation here in the forearm. That keeps you supinated. Then from there, as you turn, the racket should drop right along that sagittal plane, and then up and out and around to the finish. All right, that concludes our video on supination. I'll see you in the next one.